So, hello to all of our many viewers. Me and my mother both share a very valuable quality, and that is that we both very much enjoy the sound of our own voice. So, that is why we decided to do this podcast. Yes?
Yeah.
Are we calling it a podcast?
Say welcome to Tone Deaf. TJ.
Welcome, people. Anyway, do we have to stay with this on?
You should explain why we've got it on.
I think it's kind of obvious.
It's the extra layer of protection in these times of crisis. But basically, we're going to be brave and we're going to expose ourselves.
Reveal our true faces to the world and remove our mask of something.
But we always can have it back later if there's a need.
Okay, now we can start. So basically, me and my mother very much enjoy talking, and لخفور. How would you describe لخفور in English?
To dig into somebody's brain.
Yes, about all kinds of different topics, but especially spirituality. And one of the last places where we stopped off was when I asked you, do you feel there is a connection between the afterlife to the dream world? Or what are your thoughts about the dream world entirely? Because I personally think it's not just a reflection of one's psychology. Sometimes I talk to people in my dreams and I feel that I actually am talking to them. Even if they don't remember it, some level in our psychic is having some sort of dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
Or when I see people that have died, you see that they're not here anymore. They're like lights, or you feel they're in another realm. And yeah, what do you think about that?
Well, what you're asking about and where it takes me to immediately is the very nature of reality itself, because in so many ways, and it's a bit of a cliche, but like everything that we're experiencing, also when we're supposedly awake, it has a dreamlike quality. And
yes,
when you meditate a lot or study your dreams a lot or explore a lot with lucid dreaming, it can become quite fuzzy. The synchronicities and the kind of atmospheres of moving through reality can seem very similar to the dreamlike atmospheres. And it can even come to a place where some dreams have more of a sense of reality to them than our regular habitual daily life.
yes.
It can even turn over completely. So that's
Sometimes dreams feel more real than real life. You feel more awake than you do in your daily life.
exactly. So there's definitely a case to be put, isn't there, that it's all a form of experience, and all experience is between us and reality.
But there's no physical pain in dreams. That's the most dominant significance I've noticed between being awake and dreaming.
Yeah, but is there emotional pain?
For sure.
and is there a difference between emotional pain and physical pain, really? Or maybe
well,
in your
scientifically, there isn't. The brain receives pain if it's psychological and if it's physical in the same way. He doesn't tell the difference between physical pain to emotional pain.
Yeah.
When I was starting to practice lucid dreaming, then what they tell you to do is to do a reality checks. And every once and again, you need to see if you're sleeping or if you're awake. But I felt like those descriptions are judgmental and wrong, because who's to say this is more real than when you're dreaming? So I would just say, am I in the physical realm?
Yeah,
Or
exactly. Because in Tibetan dream yoga, the whole practice turns into like daily life practice, where you do the same thing when you're actually awake.
yes,
You know, you check, am I awake now or am I dreaming? Like, am I awake within the dream of regular, like waking life, so-called waking life? So it's definitely, you know, this judgment that when we're asleep, we're asleep. And when we're awake. And this is unreal and that is real. This is all belief systems. It's the kind of structure we put down from our dictatorial mind on reality in order to make sense of it, in order to manage it. But
yes,
it's absolutely fake. I mean, it's not even true that we wake up in the morning. The sleep center of the brain is still there. And
yes,
it's possible, for example, to be totally awake and to rest back and to sleep at the same time. It's quite a beautiful state. If you're really, really tired, it's possible to kind of fall back into a sleep state while still functioning and doing the washing up and waking up, being awake, like when you've got lots of children. You actually learn to deeply rest, to deeply sleep while being awake, to rejuvenate like that. And horses do it, and cats do it, and all kinds of animals have this trick. Like they can sleep and be awake at the same time, but humans forgot how to do it because they decided when you're awake, and when you're asleep, you're asleep. So that's already a whole load of bollocks. But there is this kind of cut and dry, either or, black or white division between being asleep and being awake.
And most people aren't truly awake when they say they are awake.
Exactly.
They are just daydreaming.
Yeah, they put on we wake up in the morning and it's a kind of formless experience and it's almost dreamlike of waking up in God knows what space, in God knows which time. And then gradually we put on an identity and we take up some issues like, oh my God, I've got to pay my taxes. Oh my goodness, I've got to do this. Oh, I'm a female. Oh, you know, I'm 50 something in my case. And it's a Tuesday and it's whatever. We pick it up. We literally pick it up out of some kind of corner of tasks, jobs, which is quite a small part of the brain. But we dress it on ourselves as forms of experience. Oh yes, I'm in an argument, so I have to continue that. But you know, all night long I wasn't in that argument. But then I remembered I was before I went to sleep. So when I wake up in the morning, I put on the argument again. Yes. Oh yeah, I remember now. I'm mad with him.
That always happens to me when me and Yossi, my boyfriend, fight and we go to sleep angry. And I'm like, now I am angry with him. I'm not going to be nice. And then I wake up in the morning and I forget. And I'm like, shit, I forgot. I was angry. I was supposed to carry on pretending I was angry. But what was I angry about?
So then you have to remember exactly and whip yourself back up into the same state in order to create a continuity from the night before. Which is,
yes, but then you realize the falseness in the fight because naturally I wake up loving.
Exactly. So what's more real, the anger from the daily life, or the love that's there when you let go and you go to sleep?
The love.
So what was the question about being dead?
Wait, but before we go back to the question, a little tip for couples. The old saying, don't go to sleep angry, is wrong. When you're angry, just go to sleep. You'll wake up much better.
I thought the tip that I heard was don't make love when you're in the middle of an argument.
That's one of the stupidest tips.
It's also wrong.
It's the perfect argument.
It is actually possible to cut through the bullshit and make love to somebody, and then the bullshit is cut through, it disappears.
Yes.
It is actually possible, but if you're going to like make love with one hand and hold on to the argument with the other, then it's a bit awkward.
Well, when you're arguing, there's a certain passion to it. You're not just oblivion to one another.
Exactly. You give a shit.
It's out of care.
Yeah. That's true. Yeah.
Um,
And it's all from the second chakra, the anger, the horniness. Often we're only arguing because we so much want to make love. So there's another kind of language, another kind of discussion, and maybe a more loving discussion is possible when you use the physical. But we go into
that is very true as well. I also remember one time when I was arguing with him, and as I was arguing, I noticed the rage was coming right out of my room. And then I thought, probably I'm not angry about the things, it's just something energetic within me triggering the fight,
Yeah.
searching for a fight.
Yeah. Well, when you look at Maggie, our dog, when she's on the edge of going into heat, she wants to kill everybody. And then and then she has a good night's sleep, and in the morning she wakes up and she's the horny like hell, and she's doing the old Humpty Dumpty in every direction. It's like a thin line. It's really a thin line. It's this basic creative energy, like passion, anger, procreation, creativity. It's all beneath the navel stuff. It's like very, very pure in a way.
Yes.
So,
And that takes me to something else that I've been thinking about a lot lately, that if a certain person has trouble with his own anger or with his own rage, he tries to eliminate it, he's eliminating the bright side of it. If you try to eliminate the shadow, he eliminates the beauty as well. You can't have one without the other. You can't say, I want to experience love and refuse to experience hate, because if you don't experience hate, you don't experience love.
yes, exactly.
If you don't experience deep sadness, you won't experience tremendous joy. You have to allow everything to be. And once you allow it, you realize you're not suffering from the grief. The sadness is just as beautiful as the happiness.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. But
But
the thing
people
is,
refuse.
a lot of people, they want to get rid of an unpleasant emotion like anger without actually knowing what it feels like in the first place. Because when your whole agenda is to get rid of it because you've been told if you experience anger, then you are bad. I mean, really bad. You're a bad person. You're not acceptable. You should be rejected. Then we try to get rid of it before we even know what it is.
Yes.
So we don't actually experience the feeling in the first place that we're trying to get rid of, which makes it a bit difficult to get rid of. It's like trying to pull up a weed from the garden without actually touching it.
Yes.
So when you actually totally and completely, at least what I found is when you totally and completely allow the vibration of anger, it's not, and the badness falls out of it, because the badness is an energy that's saying, this is bad, I shouldn't feel it. And that's
Yes.
what makes anger horrible and bad. But if you don't put the badness in it, if you don't judge it, and you just let yourself experience that kind of feeling of what it's like for Toni to be angry, what's this toniness of anger, what's the vibration of that? It's actually a very warm vitality.
Yes.
It's got a lot of strength in it. It's got a lot of power in it. It's pure. It's friendly. It's even got an incredible friendliness to it. But the judging of it, the making it bad, the rejection of it, that's like a poison inside the pure vitality of it. And that's what makes it the anger that that has such a bad name, you know, like the unreasonable, nasty, hurtful anger. But that also has its place, because at least it's honest. You know, there's one thing worse than anger and what's spoken in anger, and that's the bullshit lies that we speak to each other in order to not be angry. Like, are you angry? No, I'm not angry.
Yes, but then you're not honest with yourself, because you don't want to go to this place which you think you're not allowed to go to, and you're not honest. And then what you end up with is something much worse, is the feeling of both lying and both being lied to.
Yes, exactly. And we end up split in two, like almost like an autoimmune disease. Like we reject part of our own vitality, and then it's like we're split and we're in a conflict with ourselves before we even begin making ourselves presentable to the outside world.
Yes.
And that inner conflict also attracts conflict. It's like without wanting it, the people who are split from their own anger are going around attracting anger, because what they're broadcasting is, I've got an issue with anger.
Yes.
And in the end, somebody just wants to punch them. It's
That's
not
true. I've
funny,
met
but
people like that.
it's like they got "reject me" written on the forehead. You know?
Yes, and the suffering comes from refusal to feel the emotion. But if you just let it in and experience it deeply, it's actually a huge opportunity to
Mhm.
to be more entwined with yourself.
Yeah, and what does that mean to be entwined with yourself?
You give it space, and then it fills you, and then it lets go much stronger
Yeah,
than it was in the first instance.
yeah, absolutely,
Only after
absolutely.
you go into it is it possible for it to be released.
Yeah. The thing is, what you say is kind of genius, because a lot of people, like Californian style, when it's like because there's a lot of talk in, you know, the latest trend in non-duality is to feel your feelings and hold space for your negative emotions and be present for, you know, your anger, which is a development from like pretending not to be angry, which is where we were at in the 80s, you know.
Yes.
But still, when you hold space for your anger, it's like you're keeping a distance from it. It's like you're holding space for it, but you're holding it over here, almost like with gloves on and with, you know, with a mask. And that never really releases it. That never really completes the process. You know, there is this place of like, when you let yourself completely drown in your own anger, you become it. You let yourself totally surrender. Like, this is the radical acceptance, the total agreement to, like, so in maybe for a few moments, you are anger. Anger is you. You know, there is no separation at all. Then the magic happens.
Yes. Only when you completely dive into it, you realize this too isn't real. And
Exactly.
this
Only then
too
can you wake
isn't
up
me.
within it. Exactly. And that's
And
a
then
process of realization, self-realization. Yeah. So what does that say, Toni, about the dream world?
well, part of the inspiration for the question in the first place was that in Judaism, they say that when you're asleep, you're dead. And then you have a prayer in the morning where you thank God for bringing my soul back into my body. But the word soul, nishmati, it's made of the same letters of breath. And for people who have experienced astral projection or sleep paralysis, there's something very significant you notice when you fall back into your body is this breath of like you're you're raising your head above the water, and it's like your spirit is actually not in your body while you're in that state. So do we die when we sleep?
Okay. So we have to come back to this, because you're much more of an expert in sleep paralysis. Although I had it a bit when I was a teenager, you're more of an expert in the whole. You've been studying it more deeply, and you're probably quite an evolution on it. But death, I can talk to. I can do death. So, you know, the question: do we die when we sleep? Do we die at all? You know, like, because existentially seen, either we're always already dead.
Yes.
So, and what all that happens is a shift in the perspective of consciousness. So let's say death is always like, because all there is the now. Yeah, all there is the present moment. Yada, yada, yada. The future is an imagination. The past is a memory. Both imagination and memory exist in right now in this here present moment, which means that my expected future death is a now. It's now. As much as it's real at all, it's happening now. And in a way, what we could see it as being like the death state, if we take the judgment out of it being bad and scary and horrific, just the state of death, or the other side of physical life, and the threshold between this world and the physical world and the afterworld, so to speak. All of it is in the here and now. So in a way, it's behind our backs. You can imagine that death is always there behind your back, and you're kind of moving through your life into the next day and the next day and the next day, and always at your back is death following you, because at any moment you could turn around and there you are, you're zapped out of the game. But it was always there. It never left. So
we're just comfortable with forgetting.
yes, the whole conscious, and it is there next to the sleep center. That's the interesting thing. It's like the back of the head. This is the sleep center of the brain. You know, if you like, we fall back into sleep. You know, and so we do fall back into that kind of death area. So maybe it's the same thing, but we don't associate sleep with. We don't project into sleep the same shit that we project into death. You know, into death, it's like horrible annihilation. It's very nasty. We project into death collectively. We create a whole astral field around the concept of death, which is based on the suffering that we, the ones that didn't die, witness in the one that's dying. As if they not from their point of view, but from our point of view. So somebody's going in agony, and that for us is death. We don't see what happened after that.
Yes.
We get stuck in that moment, that death moment of pure pain and suffering, and we associate that with death. And you know, we used to live next to the cemetery, right, in the Alex Street. So death was everywhere. So you could really study. There was the astral projection of death of people as they would drive past. They would project this horror towards it, and then there was the actual reality of death, which was a kind of wormhole of people's souls kind of being lifted up to, in many ways, a better place. But leaving behind a lot of destruction in a way, a lot of shedding of karma as well. But anyway, so the sleep state is like death without the badness in it, because we associate sleep with deep rest and peace and rejuvenation and all of this, until we have a sleep disorder. And then what you often see is that sleep has become, we cottoned on to the possibility that sleep is close to death. And so a lot of the fears we have around death are now associated also with falling asleep. And then it can be hard to fall asleep, and it can be hard to surrender into sleep. And we can grasp more to aspects of self, of personality, because of the fear of dying in our sleep. So maybe that makes a little bit of sense of the Jewish prayer.
I've definitely.
You often see with people who have difficulty sleeping, you see an immense fear of death.
I remember when I was little, I was afraid of dying in my sleep, and I told you, I'm so scared, I'm not gonna wake up. And then you told me death is just change.
And how did you feel about that? Was it reassuring?
I thought to myself, oh, there is a fear because I'm probably in a certain process of changing. So that's okay. I'm still going to be here, regardless of the change of form.
Yeah. And in some ways, it's not even that the form changes that much. Maybe it's so that we kind of shed the outer form, and we become more the inner form.
Yes. And our identifications, in a way, they die when we fall asleep, and we are revealed to a certain truth, to a certain nature, and that in itself is like dying.
Yeah.
Because our belief system dies when we fall asleep.
Except for the bits of it that we hold on to so tightly that it creates dreams.
Yeah.
And that was your original question, wasn't it, about Bardo state and dreaming?
What would you say about this realm? Because I really don't believe it's just a psychological reflection of one's individual psyche.
Yeah.
Like when I talk to a certain person I have a strong bond to in the dream world, I really am talking to that person. Yeah. It's not just my projection of that person. Yeah. Even if he doesn't remember or she doesn't remember it, it's a conversation that's happening on another level.
Yeah. And
a lot of people have visitors who have died, who come to them with what they still have got left yet to say.
Yeah. You know, when you talk to me in the dream world, often you show up as a 4-year-old girl with this kind of gorgeous, direct, clear light of energy. And you reach out like that. And you don't so much talk, because you didn't talk much when you were 4. But you look at me and you kind of transmit something like a need, or even you tell me something energetically. So what do you think about that? Do you recognize that?
Well, that connects with something else that we've talked about, and that's time and space. You said the future and the past is existent in the present moment. And there's the Eckhart Tolle aspect that all there is the now, but in the now, and that also leads me to another question I wanted to ask. You can anticipate the future and you can recall the past. So it's not just all there is the now. All there is the now, the future, and the present. And that child it still exists. It still talks out of me. Sometimes I become a child again. Mostly when I'm in touch with other children, a lot. So when I talk to children, I become a child.
Yeah.
And then I come home and I'm like needy.
Yeah.
And I transform. I talk like a child because I feel like there is a need.
Yeah.
The child needs the attention, the child in me, and I let it be. I don't say, I'm Toni, I am a grown up, I will not act like that. I play with it.
The thing is that, you know, we relate to the child as being somehow inferior and less mature and less developed, and in so many ways our inner child is the inner master, and when you show up in child form, it's like a living Buddha almost.
Yes.
It's not that you're weak or that you're looking for something, it's more that you're instructing me.
That's actually okay. So I'll go on to the next question because it's this. I had experiences as a child where I was able to predict the future, and I was thinking about this while I was meditating, and I was like, is this a special ability which is mine? Toni had a special ability to predict the future. And then my intuition said that it's not. It's like children are naturally flexible when they're children. They can do splits, they are unbreakable, they can bend and squish to little forms and they'll be fine. But they lose the flexibility. So children are much more open and perceptive to specific people, patterns of thought of specific people, or to specific things people have experienced. So they telepathically can anticipate something just because they are so sensitive. And then we lose this sensitivity if we don't take care of it as we grow up, because we are taught not to trust it. We are taught to think with our left hemisphere. All right, which one is the logical one?
Left. Yeah, left. They actually did a NASA study. NASA did a study, and they actually proved that education dumbs us down. We're actually all born as geniuses, and our education literally stupefies us.
Yes.
And that's by very much concentrating the kind of left brain, kind of knowledge-based illusion.
Yes, but this is like a superpower.
Yeah.
Like people who go into new age stuff or spirituality, they're trying to recover an ability they always had.
Yeah.
And if people like I guess the question is what can we do to educate in a way that doesn't kill this superpower in children?
Yeah. Or when they're still children. Yeah.
Because if a child, would do yoga or gymnastics, he would stay as flexible as he naturally was. He wouldn't have to work hard to achieve the flexibility again. And it's the same thing with the sensitivity of the psychicness, of being connected to the telepathic web, which is there. We're just not in tune with it.
Yeah. Well, it kind of wakes up the idealist in me very strongly. But idealistically speaking, if we could dream on, You know, the Dalai Lama has really called on, this is all his focus, for a new kind of education of children, which is not the education of the mind based on putting knowledge which is already known, like dead knowledge, into their heads as if their heads are empty boxes, but giving them an education of the heart. And an education of the heart is much more about affirming their sensitivity, affirming what they feel, restoring or at least protecting their emotional integrity, letting them express and stay in connection with, which is a natural inborn connection, but honoring their inborn connection with their own naturalness, with their emotional honesty. And so it's more like not what we do in terms of educating, but what we stop doing. You know, the very notion that we educate our children is absolutely ridiculous. You know, we are so dumbed down. We're such broken goods. We're so screwed up. We're so conditioned in the software of suffering, and comes these babies into our lives who are totally fresh and totally awake and undamaged. And then we see it as somehow our job to dumb them down and to bully them into a certain kind of closed-mindedness, to make them sit still, to kind of make them hide their feelings, to control themselves. And then we dictate to them what they're feeling. I mean, we literally get messages from the school saying, you know, we all went on a trip and a good time was had by all. And so I asked the kids, did you have a good time? And they were like, no, it was bloody awful. And so we're kind of infusing them with patterns of lying and pretense as part of their so-called education with such an arrogance. And this goes on in a kind of ritualistic spiritual brutality all through like primary school, with an incredible amount of stress on the kids to do homework, to achieve this, to sit still, or else, always fear or threat and shame and blame and punishment. And then they come out of that colon and they come into high school, and the first thing the high school says to them is, everything you've learned until now, it doesn't matter. Now we start again. So all of that suffering was a complete and total sucker street. And the kids also learn that.
Yes.
It makes them very cynical. It closes down their creativity. It's so, yeah, I would dream about you know, play camps in the trees with ropes to swing on the trees and animals and, you know, creative expression, and that the children learn to express what they're discovering as opposed to how to regurgitate knowledge that somebody regurgitated from somebody that regurgitated that somebody regurgitated, and nobody even checked if it was wise or true, which is our present kind of educational systems. And then we wonder why we have record high epidemics of stress and autoimmune diseases and unhappiness and depression compared to countries which are much poorer than the Western world. You know, it's like we're so neglecting of the psyche. We're in such bad shape, and it's affecting our physical health as well. So we might live longer, but we're just basically drawing out, you know, extra years of, at best, nearly happy, depressed states of almost insentient zombiehood. You know, there is really, like, it's become so rare that people are able to really connect in the here and now in true joy, or to really like see each other with fresh eyes.
And also there is a deliberate manufacturing system which creates these zombies using drugs. It's almost not it's almost not what's the word? You know, like there's a domino effect.
Yeah.
Something. So it's almost not that. It's deliberate. We push concentration pills, which is practically speed and coke, into the child to make him zombie, to fit in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and when they're traumatized, when they're suffering, we give them a pill. As if, you know, like a kid is like traumatized because his whole world fell apart because his father buggered off or his parents divorced or something, and we give him a pill. As if that could make it better.
We educate him to do the opposite of what we started this conversation with. You
Yes,
have a feeling, don't go there.
yes, exactly.
Feel.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And you
And
see
then
the,
it never goes away. It just stays beneath the surface.
yeah, yeah. And it does a lot of damage in terms of freezing stuff for later. So in a way, you know, like Valium, for example, people hand out Valiums at traumatic funerals, you know, like people are going to traumatic shock of grief, and then often Valium is handed out, you know, like to the widow or to whoever, you know. And it can be a mercy, like a pill, because it buys some time to be able to contain and process the agony which is going on, or the shock which is going on. But the more time that goes by, the less that agony has a context. So that at a certain stage, you know, like with me, with losing my dad, you know, 20 years went by and the agony was still there waiting to be felt or expressed, but it no longer had any context. I went into total anxiety and all of this. And what was I going to say? Yeah, well, 20 years ago, my father died. It's like, well, didn't you get over it? It's like time is the greatest healer. It's really not. Healing is the healer.
Yeah.
And that degree of vital rupture in the psyche, that degree of pain, it will wait for, now they know it even waits 2 generations. It will pass from one generation to the next until it gets its liberation in terms of full sentient being felt, being alive, having a life of its own, until it gets lived.
Yes. In a way, we have a duty to feel all of these feelings, to release them.
Yeah.
And like I can say, I can say about myself that I had a rich life and I had many traumas, but most of them, there is no emotional connection to them now because I've drained the juice out of them. I've felt it so strongly that it means nothing anymore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's almost, and then sometimes when you fall into the daily life and to the sleepiness, you miss being sad. You miss the sadness of the breakup more than you miss the person. Because you miss this vulnerability, which is more honest than when you're okay, than when you're fine.
Yeah. So what you're saying in a way is that something of the truthfulness and depth of being alive is associated with grief and with sadness.
Yes.
So you still somehow look for that as a doorway to get to this deeper truthfulness of your experience.
But at a certain level, at a certain stage, it's no longer possible because there's nothing left of it.
Well, you can always just go for the truthfulness.
Yes.
You know, because if you really go for the truthfulness of joy and really let yourself feel it, or the truthfulness of love, it's bloody agonizing also.
It's intensive. And that's why we sometimes avoid going there.
Yes, exactly. Like beauty, it breaks the heart. You know, it's like, so the truthfulness takes out the kind of whole negative positive experience partition. It just becomes heartbreaking whatever, you know. It's like,
Yes.
even pleasure can kill us.
Yes. That's something I recognized in actors, that they are so in touch with it. They practiced how to live in this sensitivity most of their time, even when they're not acting.
Yeah.
They are so trained at being connected to feeling everything
Yeah.
intensely. That's why they can just cry on demand.
You know, that's you just called your dog after Jim Carrey. Tell us about Jim Carrey and his, like, what acting told him about the reality of the personality and the psyche, because you asked a lot of questions about the psyche, that it's not just the psyche or the psychology that in the dream, but then the question which kept coming to me is, so but what is the psychology? Does it even exist? What is the psyche? Is it actually a separate persona, or is it something else altogether? And that fits in quite nicely with the Jim Carrey.
Yes.
But first you have to say a little bit about Jim Carrey for people that haven't been following him.
Well, for people that haven't been following, there's this amazing documentary called, I think, Jim and Andy. It's in Netflix. And spoiler alert. If you don't like spoilers and you're intending to watch it, pause it and jump 10 minutes forward.
Even though it's live, right?
Yeah, it's live. Of course it's live. And you see how alive I am. And you see how alive I am. When he was just beginning his career, each character he would play, he would be what they would call a sarkan totali, a total actor. How would you say it in English? Sarkan totali?
That sounds great.
Absolute. An absolute actor. That means it's a certain method where actor lives 100% of the time, also when he's not in the set, as if he is the character in the movie. And he identified so much with the character that he almost forgot who he was. He would talk about Jim as a third person, like when he was acting as Andy. And then they asked him, where is Jim Carrey? And he said, Jim Carrey has quite lost it at the moment. I think he makes the conscious decision to do so because he fears that if he'll be absolutely sane, he will lose his creativity. And being so total in the characters he played made him awaken to his true self, made him realize that what he thinks he is not who he actually is, and enabled him to feel this kind of sense of spaciousness and timelessness of his being, because his identity as Jim Carrey wasn't more real than Andy or the Masked Man or the Truman Show. And every single movie he played reflects the process he was going inside of him. There's this confusion between the movie life and real life because it was very much entwined in the same. Mm-hmm. The Truman walking out of the show, out of the illusion, is also Jim Carrey walking out of the illusion and waking up to his true self.
So I remember in that documentary, he talks about his dad and seeing his dad out of fear of failure, doing a job that he didn't really like his whole life because he felt he would never succeed at doing what he loved. And he talks about, Jim Carrey talks about his realization and decision that I would rather fail at doing what I love than not even try.
Yes.
So through all of that, like in the big picture, like through all of this acting and different personas and all of this, there is quality happening. You know, this is like the logic of the dream, of the astral travel, or the logic of the Bardo state. It's like he is shining or going through a golden thread of quality to do with truth and insight. But also there's a lot of, how do you say, playfulness.
Yes.
Love. There's like a whole soul behind the persona, but it's not got a shape. It's like more a kind of emanation. So because when we talk about lucid dreaming or about Bardo states and stuff, there's a direction, there's a compass, there's an evolution. Something's going on around something, even though there's bits and pieces of illusion and fragments of the dream, but there's a central theme. And sometimes it's really important for us to look inside ourselves to see what is that central theme through all the different personas that we've had. You know, when we're trying to make a decision, for example, what to do, like what career or what to do today or tomorrow, it's also to like, when we've got a sense of that central theme, and the central theme, like the depth of joy of the heart, or the sense of truthfulness, or a kind of passion, a feeling of like wanting to be creative, being loyal to that, it tends to create the way that we need to go much more painlessly and quickly than when we get kind of distracted by fear and anxiety and doubt and confusion about who we are. Like, I mean, Jim Carrey, one of his great things is that basically he gets so confused about who he is that he gives up on it.
Yes. And you know, it's like time is changing all the time, Charlie.
Yes, exactly.
What you are is not a fixed thing. If you look
Yeah.
back on your life, you can realize that you were hundreds of different of personalities. You had different gestures, different facial expressions, and it's not because you weren't honest. It's just because your personality is flexible. It's liquid.
Yeah.
It's a sort of mirror to your environment.
Yeah.
I really feel like I'm a parrot sometimes. I hang around with certain people and I pick up their certain phrases or ways of expressing stuff, say
Mhm.
certain facial expressions.
Yeah.
And I
And
don't think it's because I'm a liar. It's just because of something kind of it's just because it's a mirror.
but then it also shows how important a part environment plays. Meaning also when like the more we're aligned with the kind of particular vibration of love that comes through us, for example, or the particular vibration of passion or creativity, the more we will attract and go for and seek out an environment which supports it.
Yes.
And I really think also that when we open up those doors within ourselves, like you open up the depth of your own love and you let yourself really call out from the depth of your love, the call is heard. People with the same vibration suddenly appear.
Yes.
And
It's
through
like
crazy
Facebook.
synchronicities, like clicking links on Facebook, or you know what I mean? It's like it needs to happen, and it's not quite the secret and the law of attraction. It's something else, but because it's not to do with what we want, it's to do with allowing ourselves to be alive, and it creates a certain invitation.
Yes.
It's like we sound our horn, da, 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 and then the tribe hears it.
Yes. Because we are always broadcasting a certain vibration,
Yeah.
whether if we are aware of it or not. And in other vibrations that are in sync with our vibrations, there's like a force of nature which brings them together to meet.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Harmonic resonance is officially
Yes.
the name, like
I
attraction.
remember
Yeah.
I went with my father, your ex-husband. I went with him to
Bless him.
a concert which was like a gesture concert to Leonard Cohen. A mechava, how would you say a mechava?
I have no idea.
When you honor someone.
Yeah.
And then we went to the concert, and before it started, everybody was talking to each other. But it was in this place, which is a musical performance stage, so the voices of everyone resonated very loudly. And it sounded like the Bumblebee piece. I could hear melodies and contrapuncts within the conversation. Everything sounded like music. A Western schooled classical musician would say it wasn't musical because it wasn't in the scale which is considered to be musical, but it sounded musical. But it was a lot of different tunes playing at the same time. And that's why a judgmental listener would say, this is not music, this is noise. And then the person started singing. And at once, there was silence. Like when you create music, supposedly, physically, you're making noise. You're sending sound waves across the air. But energetically, what you're doing is you're connecting everyone to the same vibration, and that creates a silence because everybody's listening to the same radio station. It's not 100 different radio stations playing at the same time. And that is why probably when Leonard Cohen went to a Buddhist ministry to become a monk, his teacher decided to call him Jikan, which means silence,
Yeah. Yeah.
because that's his gift to the world.
Yeah. That's amazing. You know, silence is the source of all the music. You know,
Yes,
it's like it doesn't come from anywhere else, and it's behind, and it's in a way silence is the source of everything. When you look at it through the portal of resonance, vibration. You know, light is also vibration, but it's the eyes. But the listener is this vast, the one that listens is this vast, infinite soul of open silence, isn't it?
yes,
And when you listen to the listener, there is like, I mean, silence has a whole journey by itself. And that's where music comes from. You can literally hear the music arising out of the silence. There's all kinds of music. You could even consider in the astral travels, setting the intention to explore the music of the universe, to open up the sense of listening as a musician, to open up the sense of listening within the dreamland.
yes.
Because the music has trees, the stars have trees, the birds have melodies. It's not our melodies, but they do sing melodies, you know.
Actually, I have a teacher who is a crazy genius. I had a teacher. He's not dead, but I don't study with him anymore. And he once said, I will go into nature and I will write down in notes what the birds are singing. And then he realized every bird is repeating the same tune. It's a pattern. Each bird has its song, and that's their song. They always sing the same song.
Very cool.
But I think this is why, and I very strongly believe, and people are catching on to it, like this is the science of the future, this telepathic web which connects between all of us.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, there was a physical silence. People stopped talking and one person started singing, but it was also a mental silence. People were listening to the same thing. They were broadcasting the same thing. They were receiving and broadcasting it. And that causes a resonance that amplifies it. Every musician feels it, that the audience fills the music with their receptivity and what they give back. When you play alone, it's not as powerful as it is to play with people, and you really are playing it with them. Even if they're not using their voices, they're singing it in their hearts. And this is why music is so strongly a connector between people, between also diverse cultures. They use it to bring Arabs and Jews together.
Yeah.
Because it enables people to be in the same space mentally.
But it's interesting what you say, though, because, you know, what comes forward is, for example, Bob Dylan. Yeah. Because as a musician, when you're singing, or any creative artist, you know, you're creating, if you're writing or you're singing, you're speaking towards, you're expressing or you're singing towards an audience. Yeah, so what you're describing is that from your feeling, for you, it's this human listener, this massive crowd of human presence. But I get the feeling when you were speaking, I think about Bob Dylan, and I think he really didn't give a toss about the human audience. So who was Bob Dylan singing to? Who does Bob Dylan sing to?
Yes.
Because it's almost like he's singing to the receptive quality of truth.
Yes.
There's something so radically honest, but he's also got his audience, hasn't he? And maybe it's a very, very, you know, vast field of emptiness, like pure reality that he sings into. But he sings directly through the audience's personalities and through their hearts, and not caring what they like or don't like. You know, the whole thing of "I don't believe you," when they all rejected him, because he's singing to something which is like ferociously.
At the time, people crucified him and hated him. But that's also what made him timeless and what made him a legend.
Yes. Yeah.
Like if he would have been a pet, or you know, if he would have sucked up to the crowd or tried to do what would make him popular, he would have been long forgotten.
Yeah.
That's the difference between the stereotype and the archetype.
Yeah.
One doesn't stand the test of time and the other is timeless.
Yeah.
And I had a teacher who said once, who was very much more, he was supposed to teach us the history of bass. And what he actually taught us was a coaching lesson. And he said, what did he say? He said, when you're little, you're very insecure and you're always thinking when you're a teenager what everybody else thinks about what you do. You're very judgmental and insecure. And in your midlife crisis, you say, fuck it, I'm gonna do what I want to do, regardless of what everybody thinks of me. And then when you're old, you realize everybody was self-obsessed and nobody was actually looking at you because everybody was only thinking about how they are being broadcasted.
Yeah.
And the people who catch on to this and liberate themselves and are able to free themselves then from the judgmental ego on stage, they become legends because people are attracted to the freedom.
Yeah.
They see someone who is liberated from his own restrictions, and that's what they're drawn to.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's not that Bob Dylan wasn't talking to people. He wasn't talking to their monkey mind, but he was talking to their higher selves.
Yeah. Yeah. And there is a magic in that, an incredible service to the whole. It's really, really, really liberating. It really it liberates people. You know, also when he got the Nobel Prize and he sent Patti Smith and she went and sung what she sang. What did she sing? It was amazing anyway. Maybe we play it at the end of this podcast, because again, it's this kind of resonance, this kind of calling out to the truth of experience beyond all of the rich and the poor and the status and the winning a prize or not winning a prize, beyond all of the trimmings and all the fluff that's in the way. Is this existential, she sang it's a hard rain's gonna fall. And it gives you goosebumps, you know. And she breaks down even in the middle, and her performance, you know, is kind of crap. And then she kind of picks it up again. And it's so honest and it's so real. You know, a hard rain's going to fall. And this is, you know, a couple of years before the world pandemic begins wiping out hundreds of thousands, maybe by the time it's finished, millions of people. And prophetic.
Yes.
Like really, it's the stuff which prophecy is made of. And you get in, and you know it by the goosebumps.
Yes. And that is bringing us back
You
again.
shall know them by your goosebumps.
This brings us back again to this telepathic field, which is like an internet. When the audience sees someone who's liberated of their ego, they get a window to how it feels to be liberated of your ego. My singing teacher always told me, whatever you feel is what the crowd is going to feel. It's like it's like you're uploading information and you're exchanging information, and there's a whole exchange, you know, like the bursa, exchange market of thoughts and feelings, which is happening when people aren't even aware of it.
Yeah, exactly. And what you say is totally true, because information is the felt sense of experience. In the end, all information is a resonance. It's a feeling quality. Whether it's physical or thought is a feeling in a way. And whether it's an emotion, it's all information is this experiential resonance. And that takes us back to the dream state. Like, how real is a dream? It's as real as anything else. Yes. Just like the resonance of our imagination or our vision is as real as anything else, if we let it be that. That's why imagination can be so very strong, and memory can be so very strong. Like, you know that under hypnotherapy, for example, things can come to life completely. You know. So all information is felt sense resonance, and we're not separate in it.
Yes.
So we have conversations between parts of ourselves, like musical melodies, orchestrations, but also with each other and parts of ourselves, like the child with the mother, or this or that. There's all kinds of bits and pieces of exchange going on, and harmonies and dissonances, and areas looking for resolution, and overtures and symphonies.
It really resembles the way a computer works. It's like
Yeah.
people, when they created computers, were doing it unknowingly out of intuition of how our psychic works and how the telepathic field works.
Yeah.
Facebook is very much like the telepathic field.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
You see stuff, the algorithm shows you stuff that resonates with what you feel and think.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like in life, you think everybody is into spirituality, but it's actually the people who are around you because you've summoned them in, because you're resonating on the same radio station.
And there are people who are trying to manipulate that for the purpose of profit and exploitation and power. And that's partly why it becomes more important than ever for us to fully come to life as the authors of our own experience.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like to stand for the resonances that are actually most moving through us at the depth, most truthful to us.
Yes.
Otherwise we can get taken on all kinds of trips, which is not the end of the world, but
I had a hypnotherapy session this morning,
yeah.
and all of the hypnotherapy session, my mind was showing me all kinds of uncohesive bullshit to try and distract me and not let me go into it. And I think it partly did it because I let go of fear. I realized at the beginning the fear is just because it's truthful, so let's run towards it. And then it scared it. It got scared because I had no fear. I was fearless. And it was very difficult to see and experience a specific space and time. But and my subconscious was like very impolite and didn't want to share any information and not very responsive, and took a lot of time to answer each and every question. But towards the end, when we went after the past life recalling experience and we started asking the subconscious mind questions, each question had an answer which was like one word or a short word, or very long to answer, and then no, stuff like that. But when she asked me, she said, Toni had a lot of dreams where she was strangled, or her throat was cut in dreams. And every time she's stressed in her life, she feels like a lump in her throat. And she wanted to ask you what that meant. And then all of a sudden, there was an immediate response, and it said, to give expression to the censorship of the generations.
Oh, very cool.
At the same moment, I was like, oh, well, hello. Somebody decided to show up to cooperate finally.
Speaking as one of the generational links, you totally have my permission and support with that.
I hope I translated it good. It was לתת ביטוי להשתקה של דורות.
Wow. Beautiful.
And I felt particularly it was the voice of women, all of the women who were not allowed to speak.
Yeah.
Or decades of powerful, creative, strong women who weren't allowed to shine.
Yes.
Are now bursting through.
Yeah.
Because it has to be broadcasted. It cannot be kept in. It's like you have to let the feeling immerse you.
Yeah.
So the quality has to shine.
Yeah.
and it will shine sooner or later, if not in this lifetime, the next lifetime. It's like if we refuse to feel a certain trauma or a certain feeling, it waits until we are able to feel it. Also the quality in us, also the creativity will shine regardless. Even if we suppress it, it will burst through at a certain stage.
In a way, every trauma is a trauma of disconnect from equality. And the greatest suffering is not being able to let equality live, not being able to bring part of heaven into manifestation, part of the soul into form. And,
Yes.
you know, we began by talking about anger and all of this, but, you know, anger is really frustrated passion.
Yes.
And passion is all about our purpose here. You know, it's about the need to manifest, the need to shine, to be, or the need to, and the more we can be, the more we can receive, and the more we can receive the world into us, like you said about the audience listening to the Leonard Cohen music, the more there's an echoing back, you know, there's this move, this evolutionary in a way, and the pressure on each individual to be of service to that is immense. And where we are under pressure and resisting and confused and trying to stop it happening, we suffer. And where we let it happen, even the real pain that we feel has a purpose. It's like the difference between the pain of being totally despairingly, suicidally depressed and the pain of giving birth. You know what I mean? The pain of giving birth has a purpose, and it's like something wondrous about it, something almost like, how much can it hurt? It's kind of curious, it's amazing, it's kind of awesome, and it's leading somewhere, it's part of a direction. So that's what happens to suffering then. It gets dedicated to purpose, to this passion, and the passion is all about what we're doing here, you know, the project, the creative project that we're all co-creators in a way. It's one way to say it. I don't like to go into these new age cliches, but we are responsible in the sense of not guilty, but we're co-creators.
Yes.
And where we don't take responsibility for our direction and our purpose and our passion, others will. You know, fear will step in and threats will come, and we'll get head fucked, and Netflix will take over our brains. You know what I mean? And then we'll blame it all on Bill Gates, but we lost ourselves already, because it's got nothing to do with Bill Gates. It's to do with us.
Yes.
God bless Bill Gates.
And, you know, the Western civilization looks at musicians and says, you are wasting your time on something which isn't important. And a lot of musicians, I think, feel that chasing after their dream is selfish. And that's why I think everything that we've said here is of tremendous values to all of the young artists out there to realize it is not selfish, it's a supreme service to humanity.
Be self, as Krishnamurti said, we're anyway selfish, so be selfish, be all the way, go all the way into the self, express the core of the selfishness into the world, and then you become responsible. You know? It's our problem isn't that we're selfish, it's that we're not selfish enough.
Yes.
It isn't that we're cynical, it's that we're not cynical enough. We don't go enough into the sense of truth. We should question every single thing and test it against our own direct experience.
Yes.
No, it's all these half measures, the zombie measures, which keep us in this kind of paralytic states of misalignment with
you
time.
have to question everything, but even yourself, but only you have the right to question yourself. Another person cannot dictate your own reality and experience and belief system. That's a very valuable lesson that I learned from a teacher of mine from high school, which was a tremendous inspiration to my life. I learned in a democratic school, so everything was kind of weird and different from normal schools. And in the democratic school, we didn't get grades. We got an evaluation where the teacher said with words from heart to heart what he thinks of us. And then we had one teacher which was more advanced than the advanced school and said, I'm not going to write what I think about you. You're going to write what you think about yourself. And how do you think you did in this class? Do you think you did well, or do you think you did wrong? And don't let anyone else ever tell you how you did, because only you can know. And you can choose to lie and say, I was the best student ever, but you will know you're lying.
Great school. It definitely has its moments.
Yes, had. No,
And
for
has,
sure.
but for your little sister, it's still the present tense. Okay, Toni, we should arm ourselves again to go out into the world and put on our protection of separate self again. Namaste. We see you again next week for another episode of
Another session.
Crazy Corona Times with TJ and GJ and Tone Deaf. Bye.